જય વસાવડાના તમામ વિડીયોનો એક જ ઓફિશિયલ ખજાનો એટલે planetJV યુટ્યુબ ચેનલનો જલસો. તો જલ્દી લાઈક કરો, સબસ્ક્રાઇબ કરો અને બેલ આઇકન પ્રેસ કરી ઓલ સિલેક્ટ કરો જેથી તમે જોઈ શકો અમારા વિડીયો સૌથી પહેલા.
Namaskar. Is everyone ready? Are we excited or are we not? Can I hear a round of applause for the three amazing panelists here? Let me start by saying it is an honor to be sharing the same stage as the three of you. One can only hope and dream about this. Rohan and I are excited and absolutely delighted that we get to pick your brains for this event. And I'm 100% sure that everyone here will leave today with abundance of pride and knowledge. With this, I would like to start the panel today. And my first question is for Kartikeya sir. And it is going to be the same question for all the three panelists. It is, what have been our achievements in the last 75 years, according to you, in your respective field, which is environment?
Thank you, and it's a great pleasure always to come to GCCI and be part of this wonderful audience and this place here. I think in environment, the fact that we still have so much of our environment intact, including things like, say, the tiger, our species, which have long disappeared in Western development. They don't have, they just simply don't have it. And in spite of the fact that our population has grown something like 4 times, we are still able to maintain it. So I think there is a lot to be said. And I think the president in his opening comment also mentioned it, Ratna mentioned it, that what we have done in so many fields. The thing is that the challenges of environment are enormous. If you look at it from the fact that we also want to be and should be rapidly developing. Fossil fuels as one, on which the entire Western development took place. When Britain was developing, it was a wonder to have a coal and oil and things to develop. And that's how they developed. They did not at that time have to even worry about the environment because they thought if we throw something out, ultimately the globe is big enough to be able to absorb it. We are developing at a stage where all this is known. So we have to be cautious. At the same time, there is something called justice here, that we cannot say that we will not develop using fossil fuels unless you give us an alternative. And some of you did it that way. So there are challenges. There's a tremendous challenge of pollution, for instance, today. The pollution is really in a capital city, we are hardly able to breathe. They have to stop things. As I said, the tiger is still there, but biodiversity loss is still enormous. Even, say, 20 years ago, the birds I saw in my garden, I don't see anymore. Maybe somewhere else. The chakli, the sparrow, has almost disappeared. It used to be such a thing in Ahmedabad, you used to sparrow all over, but you don't have it now. So there are many forces which are acting. I think India is again, under the current government, trying to take the leadership in this. We are not daunted by the fact that we have these challenges. What do we do? We are not crying about it. The Prime Minister recently concluded COP26 on climate change in Glasgow, mentioned very ambitious targets. He said by 2070, we'll be a net zero emitter, which is quite aggressive. He says by 2040 or 2050, 50% of our energy will come from non-coal based. Pollution is another challenge which we are doing. You mentioned about a roadmap here, but several industries, just now we are working with Surat, the textile industry is trying to have a roadmap to sustainability over the next 10 years. So I think we have achieved a lot, but I think what we have to do is more difficult than many other countries because we also have equally the responsibility of developing. We have equally responsibility of taking people out of poverty. And that. So it's a major challenge, but I think we are doing well on the whole. Thank you.
Thank you. You are absolutely and 100% right about that we have a long road ahead of us. Same question to you, Abhay sir. What have been our achievements in the last 75 years, according to you, in heritage?
Thank you to GCCI, Ratna and Hemant for inviting me here. We have a lovely audience. I'd like to just start off by saying that I went to a school where the thing that they taught us was to ask questions. Our facilitators or our teachers, we call them facilitators. So I'm not here to give any answers. I'm here to ask questions. My biggest question to the audience, since I work in heritage, is what is your understanding of heritage? And if anybody would like to answer that, what is heritage? I think there is a big misunderstanding about the word heritage, Our heritage, in my view, is our culture. It's an intangible. Our culture is the source of anything that we create. The Taj Mahal, the temples of the South is an outcome of our culture. So without our culture, we have lost everything. The natural heritage is very much part of that. And it is ironic that the same question applies to development. Because what is development? 3 years or 2 years of pandemic meant huge slowdown in so-called development. There was a slowdown in GDP, slowdown in growth of industry. But what happened? Nature thrived. Animals came out. So was there a slowdown? Was that what we are pursuing? Is that really development? These are the questions that came to mind. And really, I thought that in this august audience and members, influential members of society, it would be my duty to ask these questions, that what in your view is your heritage? Is it only things that people have left behind? Or is it something that you create? Is heritage only something that you inherit or you propagate? So how many of us can say with pride that we have created some heritage that the future generations can look up to? How many of us? What are we doing every day to contribute or propagate to this heritage? So in the last 75 years, I would say that our greatest heritage perhaps is contribution of people who have contributed to making universities like IIT, IIM, NIDs, PRL, ISRO, a lot of them attributed to a few families. I think that really the aspiration of the youth has to be the creation and propagation of knowledge. And if we can do that, the rest follows automatically. In Shreyas, which I manage, we say that we say to our parents, what will our kids get from Shreyas? And the single line answer I have is that we attempt to create the right lens through which your child can look at the world. Because it is our lens that decides how we see things. So my view of our 75 years of independence is that yes, we have tried to do things to our best of our understanding, and we have a long way to go to really reprioritize and re-ask these questions and not be like rats following a Pied Piper on a dream of development. Thank you.
Thank you. That I'm sure everyone is here thinking, wow, heritage needs to be created as well. Thank you for that. Jai Bhai, same question for you. What have been our achievements in the last 75 years, according to you, in literature?
Yeah, when we got independence, we have got a great legacy of Gandhiji. Because in a field of literature, whether it is Hindi literature, there was not much of it in English literature at that time, though it was there. And in field of Gujarati literature, it has already been said that it is Gandhi Yug. Because most of the people, suppose you have rightly mentioned the lens. The lens was given by storytelling literature in Gujarati, like Ramanlal Soni or Jivram Joshi. Or these people are freedom fighters. They fought for the independence of India, and then they applied themselves as a teacher, as a writer, as an author. Also, Kanayalal Munshi to Uma Shankar Joshi. There are so many people. So it's a huge context. Literature is a huge ocean, one can say. In India especially, it's a land of storytelling, the land of greatest epics ever told to the mankind. So from the Ramayana and Mahabharata, from Rigved, we came through the different kind of stories, different kind of poetries. At the time of independence, the context was different. Gandhiji has initiated that people should get some knowledge, some values, some virtues through the literature. So that was that aspect at that time when we got freedom, when we got independence. From Zabarchand Meghani to Rabindranath Tagore, they want to establish a new society, a new free mindset in heaven of that freedom, let my country awake, that sort of thing. Tagore has already written. But then what happened? Then two things happened in last 75 years. First, there is a wave of new, you can say the Kafkaish or Kamuish type of literature. Suresh Joshi to Madhurai and Raymond in Ahmedabad. So you can very well connect it with this new Sitanshu Mehta for that matter. I'm talking in context of Gujarati literature right now. So in 70s and 80s, we have got Chandrakant Bakshi to Khushwant Singh. So many people who have created different kind of storytelling, modern, new, international kind of storytelling, magic realism from the Latin American literature, and Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, especially dedicated tale to the Indian freedom movement. And the Midnight Children means the new generation came out of it. Now, then what happened after 2000, in last 15 years or so, what we have seen is a revolution of digital era. So everything is digitized. So now writing the books on piece of paper or even with the computer is outdated thing, because immediately you can create video, immediately you can create a vlog rather than blog even. So it's a very different kind of transformation that we are heading to. That right now, medium of expressions are changing. It's not only a book, not only a newspaper. Nowadays, people are not reading newspaper in the morning religiously. They get the news feed into their mobile. So in a way, the creation of literature is changing. More literature is directly written for the web series content or movie content or that sort of thing. Initially, it was started like, suppose Devdas or Reva, that sort of books should be converted into the screen. Now we have got the direct screen literature that is converted of late into the books, like Game of Thrones, GOT type of thing. Okay, so this is a different and very interesting kind of transformation that we are heading to. Unfortunately, because of lack of reading habit, we cannot have more creators. We have more readers because of the population explosion. But unfortunately, we don't have more creators. Where are new creators in Gujarati or Hindi or English? If you want to enlist new names, hardly 10 or 15 names you can remember. In a country of more than, you can say, 130 billion people, it's not 1.3 billion people, sorry. But it is not a good thing to have only 10 or 15 new voices in the literature. So that freedom we need to establish, that a literary person, a creator, maybe a digital creator, need to raise his or her voice freely. Thank you.
Sorry. So again, thank you very much, Jaybai. Very interestingly, you said about the different medium of expressions now has been, and you also talk about the freedom of writing. The storytelling was again, storytelling in today's time becoming popular and popular. Everybody is adapting that mode of communication. So, and being a writer, it is very important. And I believe that. So I want to ask you, what according to you is really the freedom of expression is?
That's a really good question. Freedom of expression means right to offend. That's very clear-cut definition from me. Okay, see, suppose I am telling something, I am drawing something, I am writing something, I am visualizing something or giving some pictures. If you are feeling offended by it, that's fine. It's my expression. It's not your expression. And it is protected by our constitution, protected by lawmakers, protected by the 75 years old generation, one can say. Because the people who were lawmakers for our constitution were you can say, like Ishwar Dada, it's an older generation. But they have given this freedom. And John Stuart Mill once rightly pointed out that, see, if it is harmful then it's a different. Then it is a purview of jurisdiction. If it is harmful, suppose waging a war or violence or something that is personally or physically giving you some injury or some scars, then it's fine. But suppose you are telling that because you are telling this, I'm not liking it, and that's why you have to shut up. Now this is, it is like that because it's your expression that I may not like. So we have got Veer and we have got Das, both simultaneously together. Some people who are doing like Veer means being brave or bold. Some are Das, means they are just following the trend. So I'm just joking about the terminology. It's nothing to the person itself. Okay, but the thing is that now that freedom of expression, we are losing day by day because we are too cautious about the other's opinion. Now, any literary freedom, or suppose any creative freedom, suppose Abhay wants to create a one different kind of architecture or building. Okay, now, or Karthik wants to create a different kind of garden, or suppose a species, a protection of some species. Okay, now it's here his view. He's investing his own time and efforts for that. Now, suppose just by giving opinion, just by throwing opinion, if we want to demolish this structure, then we are heading towards a chaos at the juncture of 75 years. It's a sheer chaos. There is no law, no order, just because some mob or some trolls creating that one should not wear this type of thing, one should not write this type of thing, one should not joke on this type of thing. It's a sheer chaos. And freedom, see, we have got development and infrastructure at the time of Britishers even, at the time of Shah Jahan and Akbar even. We have got roads, we have got money, we have got some great structures, temples even. But unfortunately, what we are not having was a freedom of expression. We cannot freely express our own self as a citizen of India, as a human being. Now that freedom was given by all these great stalwarts and freedom fighters. Bhagat Singh or Subhash Chandra Bose lost their lives because of that freedom they want to pursue. It was not merely a political freedom. It's a freedom of creation, freedom of expressing yourself as a human being. And that somehow we are at the crossroads nowadays.
Thank you, Jaytva. You mentioned Gandhi Yug. You know, that makes me think, Karthike sir, how do you think India can take forward the idea of Gandhi for the future generations? And in your opinion, what should be the role of today's generation to do the same?
Thank you. That's a nice question. Often we think of Gandhi in terms of those external symbols.
Right.
So should I wear khadi? Should I do the rentio chalao jo ek nahi? Things like that. I think it boils down to what Jay said just now, that fearlessness was very much part of Gandhi. The non-violence actually requires much more power than violence. To stand and let someone physically damage you, or to say something knowing that the consequence will be to go to jail, it requires huge amount of things. And I think many of us will feel that we have compromised on that. As Jay said, we feel that we should say this, but because of a certain circumstances, because of what other people will feel, we don't. Gandhi is one who could say what he liked, even if his own party was totally against it. He said, okay, they might throw me out, but I will still say it. To his own family. He says about his own family, when Duda and Dani were being introduced, his nephew, Magan Bhai, he said, I will not stay in this ashram if you introduce these people. So he left actually. He joined Gandhi much later. His wife said that, why are you pushing it so much? Why are you pushing Ahmedabad society to this extent? And he says, if you want to go out, you go out. But these people are coming here and going to eat in the same kitchen as this. Now, these are powerful thoughts. And I think what Abhay said at the beginning, that our culture is really that. I think this culture is prone to democracy in a sense. Democracy didn't start there. One of those shocking things was when I was in Cambridge, there was a series going on in the Times of India, which was called India's Disintegrating Democracy. And it got me so worked up, so that whole day would go bad, because I was so irritated with the fact that someone could write. They say we give it another few years at best. But the point is that it is very deep down. Now that culture gets eroded with formal education really imposing something. I mean, I'm all for the education system. I work in it all the time. But the formal education brings in values necessarily which don't do this. Abhay was talking about asking questions. So I was asked one place that how do we bring curiosity into my children? How do I get them to ask questions? And what I said was that questions asking is automatic. It's built-in feature of every child. It's we who kill it. People were asking me, are you growing a beard? I said, no, I'm not growing it. You are cutting it. The growing is happening on its own. You know, it's like action. So it's like that. The question asking is inherent, but we tend to stop that happening. Jayshree's son, when he was in college school here, he looked out of the window and he was asked, what do birds eat? And he raised his hand and he said, birds eat cows. Because outside the window, it was drought. You could see carcasses, you could see vultures, you could see crows on that thing. So the teacher says, the birds eat grains and it eats insects. That's what the textbook says. Because you're making fun of me. Now the child is actually seeing something, but that is not allowed to be said because it is the wrong answer. And any number of instances of that nature is what happens. So through our schooling system, in fact, stop it. There are schools like Shreyas which don't stop it, but other schools, actually we stop it. Then we try to recreate this whole thing. We try to recreate how do you ask questions, how do you become a democrat in the sense Jay is saying. So Gandhiji in his guts has to be understood. Gandhiji in his ability to discuss, when we were creating an exhibition on Gandhi in Ahmedabad, there's an exhibition, one of the first ones. We said that we don't want people to come like this and see Gandhi, that reverence. So let us ask a provocative question. So we ask provocative questions, which look like almost you are insulting Gandhi. Did Gandhiji do this just to get publicity? So, there's a question like that. The text underneath is all from Gandhi himself. Gandhi himself has answered that and how he's answered it. So the whole idea was that Gandhi provoked discussion, provoked thinking, and also he was not afraid of saying that was wrong and now I'm right. He was against, for instance, intercaste marriages at one stage in his life. Later, he said that unless it is intercaste, I will not actually visit. So Mahadev Bhai's son Narayan, when he was getting married, it was not intercaste. Now he is one of his favorite kids, Bablo. But he said, I will not go because now I've taken a vow that unless it's intercaste, I will not go. Right. But that type of self-admission of guilt or wrong is rare. So there's so much to be learned from Gandhi. But it is not the externalities and the symbols alone. That sometimes distracts you from the real heritage. And that's where Abhay's point about intellectual, intangible heritage. The heritage of Gandhi is that. Yep. And that's what we want to keep alive. And this whole current discussion on what do we do when we are redeveloping the ashram, it is basically that. The Prime Minister is also very conscious of that. He wants that experience should transform us in the right way. We are not going to see a monument as such. We are going to feel what Gandhi was. And that's the challenge.
Thank you very much, sir. I do have a follow-up question, but before I get that, I'll go to Jaytva because that's one of the problem question I have too. So, sir, especially Gujarati, the Gujarati bhasha je apni chhe, if we can say, how do we preserve that language and promote the regional language? Because there is at least I have a confusion whether it's a disappearing, because especially with the youth, they prefer to talk in English. Like અમે લોકો ઘરે ગુજરાતીમાં જ મમ્મી પપ્પા સાથે વાત કરીને મોટા થયા છે, but my kids, they talk in English. They kadaч today's youth also prefer to go into English medium rather than the Gujarati medium, right? I studied in a Gujarati medium, but I cannot think of my kids going in a Gujarati medium, at least at this point of time. So one side it says that, okay, language is disappearing, but on the other side, or it could be just my assumption, but on the other side, the Gujarati regional movies are being promoted. In fact, last couple of years, the way the Gujarati movies are coming, it's phenomenally, we are going at a different platform. So what is the state of, is it really disappearing, or how do we preserve or promote the language, or it's just an assumption of ours?
That's really interesting. સરદાર પટેલે એક વખત એવું કહેલું કે જે ભાષામાં બિલ બને ને ટકે. ગુજરાતમાં જ મોટા થયા એટલે કહ્યું હશે, ગુજરાતીઓને ધ્યાનમાં રાખીને. આ તો પાછા આપણે ચેમ્બર ઓફ કોમર્સમાં બેઠા છે. કે બિલ બને ટકે મીન્સ કે જેમાં ફાયદો થાય, જેમાં કંઈક મળે, એ ભાષા ટકે. હવે ગુજરાતી ભાષામાં એવું થયું છે કે તમે ગુજરાતી ભાષાનો ઇતિહાસ જુઓ ને, તો આપણે જે ગુજરાતી અત્યારે લખીએ બોલીએ છીએ એ પણ ગાંધી યુગની જ દેન છે. એ પહેલા તો મહને, તહને, મહારું, તહારું એવી ગુજરાતી જે જૂની હતી નર્મદ સુધીની, એ તો બહુ અત્યારે ફાવે નહીં આપણે વાંચવા જઈએ તો. એટલે અત્યારે જે આપણે જે શુદ્ધ ગુજરાતી કહીએ છીએ પણ ગાંધીજી આ જ અમદાવાદની અંદર જોડણી કોષથી શરૂ કરી અને વિદ્યાપીઠમાં જે અમુક પ્રોજેક્ટ કર્યા, પ્રકલ્પ કર્યા, એની ભેટ છે. હવે ભાષા બહુ ઇન્ટરેસ્ટિંગ ટોપિક છે એટલા માટે કે અમદાવાદમાં આપણે બેસીએ, સુરતમાં બેસીએ, વડોદરામાં બેસીએ, અર્બન એરિયામાં આપણને એમ લાગે કે ગુજરાતી ખતમ થઈ ગઈ અને અંગ્રેજી છવાઈ ગઈ. જ્યારે તમે ગામડાઓમાં જાઓ, કારણ કે કઈ ગુજરાતમાં ખાલી આ 4 કે 5 સિટીઝ નથી, ગામડાઓ પણ ઘણા બધા છે, ત્યારે ઉલટું છે. એમના માટે જેમ્સ બોન્ડની ફિલ્મ પણ ગુજરાતીમાં ડબ કરીને આપો તો વધારે જોવાનું મન થાય છે. જેમ તમે રાઇટલી પોઈન્ટ આઉટ કર્યું કે હવે હિન્દી સબટાઇટલ તમે જુઓ, મોટાભાગની સિરીઝમાં તમે જોશો હિન્દી અથવા તો ગુજરાતી, એટલે રિજિયોનલ લેંગ્વેજ, આપણી લેંગ્વેજ વધારે ચાલે છે અંગ્રેજી કરતા. ડબ મૂવી અમારે રાજકોટમાં તો એવું થઈ ગયું છે કે ઇંગ્લિશ મૂવી ઓરિજિનલ કોપી જ ના આવે, એના માટેનો સ્પેશિયલ શો રાખવો પડે, કારણ કે ડબ વર્ઝનમાં કમાણીને બિલ બનાવવા વાળી ભાષા, તો બિલ હિન્દી ડબિંગમાં વધારે મળે છે. તો ઓરિજિનલ ઇંગ્લિશનો શો એક હોય આખા અઠવાડિયામાં અને હિન્દી ડબના શો વધારે હોય. તો એટલે ગુજરાતની અંદર માત્ર અર્બન ગુજરાતી જ નથી. હું મારો રત્ના વિતસતા બધા લોકો એવા છે કે જે ઇન્સ્ટાગ્રામ ઉપર હોય, ફેસબુક ઉપર હોય, મારો અનુભવ કહું કે હું અંગ્રેજીમાં કોઈ પોસ્ટ લખું તો 200-500 એલાઇટ ક્લાસ જેને આપણે કહીએ ભદ્રલોક એ વાંચે, પણ હું ગુજરાતીમાં પોસ્ટ લખું તો નીચે બધી રમતિયાળ કોમેન્ટ પણ થાય અને એમાં જરાક ખંખેરવાની પણ મજા આવે. એ ભાષામાં એ બળ છે. તમે અંગ્રેજીમાં જરાક એમ કહો કે યુ આર અ ડોંકી, યુ આર અ મંકી, એમાં તમને એવી મજા ના આવે જેમાં તમને એમ કહો કે ટોપા તને નથી ખબર પડતી. આ જે વાત છે ને, એ જો તમને અત્યારે ઇન્સ્ટન્ટ રિસ્પોન્સ છે ને, કારણ કે એ રૂટ્સમાં છે. આપણા અથાણાના ટ્રાન્સલેશન ન થાય, મોબાઈલના જેમ ગુજરાતી ન થાય, તમે સિમ કાર્ડ, નેટવર્ક એવી બધી વસ્તુઓનું ગુજરાતી ન કરી શકો, એમ તમે છુંદાનું અંગ્રેજી ન કરી શકો. ક્રશ્ડ મેંગો, પિકલ એવું થોડું ચાલે. અભયભાઈ વધારે કહી શકે આ વાત ઉપર, કારણ કે એમને બધાને અગાશીમાં આખી દુનિયાને ખવડાવ્યું છે એમણે આ બધું. પણ તમે વિચાર કરો, એટલે અમુક વસ્તુ, બાફલો એ બાફલો જ છે, કેરીનો બાફલો એ બાફલો, તમે અંગ્રેજીમાં લખવું પડે BAFLO. ભજીયાનું ફ્રીટર્સ કરો તો આપણે ભજીયા ખાવા વાળાને એમ લાગે કે બીજી વાનગી છે, એટલે આ એવોઇડ કરીએ. એટલે આ જે વાત છે, આ લેંગ્વેજમાં જ જોડાયેલી વાત છે કે ટેકનોલોજીની લેંગ્વેજ છે અંગ્રેજી છે, બિલ વાળી લેંગ્વેજ છે, પૈસા કમાવા ઝાઝા પૈસા મળે. પરાગ અગ્રવાલની લેંગ્વેજ છે અંગ્રેજી છે, કારણ કે અત્યારે ન્યૂઝમાં છે આજથી. તો આ લેંગ્વેજ માટે આપણને બહુ પેલું થઈ જાય છે કે ના, આનો ચાર્મ છે. હવે એની સાથે એક્સપ્રેશન, પેલી તમે કહો છો મમ્મી પપ્પા સાથે બોલવાની ભાષા, અથવા તો આ આવી જૂની, માની લો કે ગરબા ગાવાની ભાષા, નાચવા કૂદવા માટેની, હું જે કેટલો જે ખજાનો કહું છું આજે પેલો સાહિત્યનો, એ ઉલેચવાની ભાષા, કે ભાઈ એ ખજાનો ઉલેચવો શબ્દ જ વાપરું છું, ડિગિંગ નહીં, ખોદવું નહીં, ઉલેચવું, બહાર કાઢો એમાંથી, તમે એમાં નાહો, એમાં તરબોળ થાવ, એની મજા કરો. તો આ ભાષા તો ગુજરાતી રહેવાની. હવે જે મુશ્કેલી થઈ છે એવી થઈ છે કે આનું કોઈ નિયંત્રણ તો છે નહીં. એટલે હમણાં જ ગુજરાત સરકારે એક સરસ આઈડિયા અમલમાં મૂકવાની કોશિશ કરેલી. હવે ક્યારે મુકાય આપણે જોઈએ, પણ એ આઈડિયા એવો હતો કે એક જ સ્કૂલમાં ઇંગ્લિશ અને ગુજરાતી બંને મીડિયમ ભણાવે. એટલે અમુક સબ્જેક્ટ, સાયન્સ અને એ બધા જે છે એ ઇંગ્લિશમાં ભણાવાય. એટલે ટેકનિકલ ટર્મિનોલોજી, મેથેમેટિક્સમાં એમાં જે પ્રોબ્લેમ થાય છે, વિચલન વિકલન એવું સાંભળીને કોઈક સંસ્કૃતમાં પાઠ ભણતા હોય એવું લાગે ગણિતને બદલે, એ મુશ્કેલી નીકળી જાય. અને સામે જે એ સિવાયની સમાજ વિદ્યા છે, ઇતિહાસ છે, ભાષા પોતે છે, એ ગુજરાતીમાં ભણાવાય. એટલે આ એક એનો સરસ ઉકેલ છે. અને હું તો એક બહુ સિમ્પલ સોલ્યુશન આપું છું એટ ધ જંક્ચર ઓફ 75 years ઓફ ફ્રીડમ, કે કોઈ જજમેન્ટલ થયા વિના, કોઈ આ માં છે, આ માસી છે, આ આંટી છે, બધા આપણને પ્રેમ જ કરે છે, બધી ભાષા આપણી જ છે એમ માનીને તમે એટલું જ કરો કે ઘરે ગુજરાતી વાંચી લખી બોલી શકો એવી એક જનરેશન, એવી એક પેઢી તૈયાર કરો જેને અંગ્રેજી સરસ ફાવતું હોય. આ હું તમારી નજર સામે જ છું. મને ચાલી જાય એટલું અંગ્રેજી આવડે છે, એનાથી વધારે અંગ્રેજીની જરૂર નથી. એટલું 36 દેશ ફરીને મને સમજાણું, કારણ કે મારે કઈ ચેતન ભગત તો થવું નથી કે અંગ્રેજીમાં જ લખતો હોઉં. તો એ વાત જે છે એ બહુ ઈઝી છે, એ બહુ સહેલું છે. એટલે એ પેઢી આપણે તૈયાર કરી શકીએ. મેં હજી સુધી, અને આ મહત્વની વાત છે, તમે બધા વિચારજો, અહીં તો બધા એવા લોકો બેઠા છે કે જેણે દુનિયા જોઈ હોય. હજી સુધી કોઈ એવા આરબ નથી જોયા જે કેમ્બ્રિજની લેવલનું ગુજરાત ઇંગ્લિશ બોલતા હોય છતાં એમને અરેબિક સ્ક્રિપ્ટ વાંચતા ન આવડતી હોય. હજી સુધી એવા કોઈ મોંગોલિયન બ્રીડના લોકો, મોંગોલિયન બ્રીડ કહું છું એટલે જરા એરિયા મોટો થાય, સિંગાપોર પણ આવી જાય, જાપાન પણ આવી જાય, કોરિયા પણ આવી જાય, ચીન પણ આવી જાય, બરાબર, મોટો એરિયા થાય, થાઈલેન્ડ પણ આવી જાય. તો આ બધા આના મોબાઈલ બનાવેલા આપણે વાપરીએ છીએ, આના બનાવેલી ટેકનોલોજીની વસ્તુઓ આપણે વાપરીએ છીએ. આમ છતાં એ લોકો સરસ અંગ્રેજી બોલતા હોય ત્યારે પણ પોતાની ભાષા ન વાંચી શકે એવી પેઢી પેદા નથી કરતા. ઇવન મહારાષ્ટ્રમાં કે તમિલનાડુમાં એવી પેઢી નથી જોઈ. પણ આપણે જરા દરિયા કિનારો મોટો એટલે બહારથી બહુ ઝાઝા પવનો આવે ગુજરાતમાં, અને પેલું સુશા પૈસા ચાર એ મગજમાં આવી ગયું છે બરાબર કે ભાઈ આમાં તો રૂપિયા ન પડે ઝાઝા, એટલે ફેસિનેશન એક છે. આ ફેસિનેશન પાછો અંગ્રેજી શબ્દ છે, બરાબર. મોહ કરતા ફેસિનેશન, ફેસિનેશન જો વજનદાર લાગે, મોહ બોલું તો ધાર્મિક લાગે. તો એ ફેસિનેશન જે છે ને એને કારણે આ મુશ્કેલી થાય છે.
Thank you very much. Jaytva, તમે અગાશિયાની વાત કરી. And I want to say, Abhay sir, House of MG has given a certain panache to Gujarati food. And, we always get so mesmerizing. That place is so mesmerizing. Can you please talk about how does heritage and development go hand in hand? How do you reach out to the youth of the youth of India? Let's say Ahmedabad per se. Does that happen by modernizing, or how if you can please talk about that?
I think maybe the youth over here can talk about it better. But really, the goal, as I was talking about heritage and creating heritage, is that in whatever I try to do, I try to be honest to my growing self. My growing self is the self which is constantly evolving. So whether it is House of MG or what we do at the foundation, after what the founder did, is constant movement. And I think that constant movement to change and not being afraid of change and not fossilizing something, because conservation of heritage versus revitalization are two separate things. So I believe in revitalization rather than preservation. I don't want to make museums. I want to try and create living and propagating culture which is as comfortable in wearing a torn pair of jeans as it is in wearing chudidar kurta. That comfort level and that issue of fashion and being aspiration and whether you have a big car or a small car is immaterial. What matters really is how you develop your personality. And I think the biggest challenge that our youth face today is, who am I? What is the answer to that question? You become something because you own something. You are a sum total of your brands, unfortunately. So I think at House of MG, anybody who comes there will not be impacted by, because we hide all the brand. There is no brand, and what the building is or what its heritage is becomes the brand. I think that's the only thing I can say about what our philosophy is.
That's amazing. I completely agree. I was actually there the other day attending a wedding. I went to the bathroom and I was about to use the toilet paper, and I saw a fun fact, very alarming fact about environment, is that it takes a tree to make 45 kilos of toilet paper, and every day 85 million trees are cut to make toilet paper. So you can do the math, which is so alarming. Which actually I want to ask, how do you, when let's say when you're conserving a heritage property, or you're talking about making a new property, or developing a new property, how does environment and sustainability come into picture for that?
I think sustainability is again very much part of the lens that you grow up with. I'd be the last person to point out whether in anything that we do, all of us, we should be looking at ourselves rather than anybody else. Whatever we do during the day, what I'm doing, drinking from this bottle or anything that I'm doing, is it impacting environment and is it affecting my belief, or am I saying it just for the sake of it? So really, this whole business of sustainability is very integral part of our culture. It's only the Western influences which tell us about conservation, because if we live the way we did or we continue to in villages, there is no question. There is no option to sustainability, whether the way we build or what we eat. It's slow food. We cook what we eat. There is no packaged food. Unfortunately, this big struggle about the question of development is the biggest issue. What is development? Getting for a villager, it is eating something from a packet is very fancy. For a urban child, it is going to an English medium school, or for a parent. Similarly, that aspiration has really infiltrated our culture to such an extent, and it's propagated by internet and media and all the Western press about what we should be doing. If you go to any airport, you only see Western ads, except for Ahmedabad. I must say they have only Indian brands, which is excellent. But the same thing, every mall, every you're bombarded by this Western idea of consumption. And really, our Indian idea, or our all old cultures have the idea of total sustainability. Our cultures are sustainable. So I don't think sustainability is something you teach people. It is inherent. You bring it out rather than suppressing it, as Kartikeya Bhai says, that in whatever we do, our actions influence people around us, and our actions are truly what we need to watch rather than watching others.
Thank you, Abhay. Since we are on the topic of sustainability, and this is the question for you, Kartikeya sir. You also talk about the Gandhian lifestyle. So I want to say the sustainable living is a lifestyle, as we all say that. How did you get introduced to this lifestyle, and what are the challenges you might have come across while going through this, and especially what suggestions would you give to the people sitting here to be more mindful and aware about the environment and being focused on the sustainable lifestyle?
Thanks, Rohan. Before I answer that, I just wanted to comment on this discussion which was happening, because you asked about Gujarati, about preservation, and I think the difference between preservation and conservation is really that one is a language is living. I think the only reason English has succeeded so well is that it has been absorbent over here. We in this context of Shuddh Karwano, we wipe out things. So even Kathiawadi Gujarati is not considered a different enriching force in Gujarati. It is quite different. Instead of saying how beautiful that expression is. So I think we do need to understand that if you want Gujarati to really thrive, the richness of Gujarati must be captured and not be kept out. I think that was one point. The other is this thing about translation. Singapore Airlines, for instance, it's an SOP of theirs that any flight coming into Ahmedabad will have a Gujarati menu. So that's great. Written in Gujarati, it will have in English and Gujarati, or English and Marathi if it's going to Bombay. Now, interestingly, there is a translator there. એટલે somewhere Rotli was translated in the English version into Indian bread. But જે ગુજરાતીમાં લખ્યું છે એ ભારતીય બ્રેડ. એટલે પેલું બે વાર ભાષાંતર થયું ને એમ પેલું રોટલી જતી રહી. હા હવે રોટલીમાંથી ભારતીય બ્રેડ થઈ ગઈ ગુજરાતીમાં. એટલે you have that sort of thing. You also have original, because I was talking about environment. Lal Singh Bhai and Lav Kumar Bhai very much were part of my getting into the birds and the answer which he asked for. But they translated birds which come to Gujarat into Gujarati names. Many of them don't have a name. You see the white-breasted fan-tail flycatcher. હવે શબ્દોનું ભાષાંતર કરી શકતા હોય, પણ it's a bird which really dances. એટલે એનું નામ નાચણ પાડ્યું એ લોકોએ, અને that is the name, Gujarati name. એટલે what they've done is they've standardized, and perhaps it's not true in other languages, but ગુજરાતીમાં આ બધા પક્ષીઓનું શું નામ હોવું જોઈએ, it is standardized, and we've got a book which says this. We ourselves are doing a project, and what you know is, for instance, this concept of waste is purely a human concept. I mean, no forest has waste. No natural system has a concept of waste. Waste is something which humans have invented. Right. That is putting the wrong thing in the wrong place. Right. એટલે અત્યારે એ લોકો, we are talking about the circular economy, like nature is circular. I mean, we are doing a major project with municipal schools in Ahmedabad, And we wanted to bring the circularity. We called the project Rochak. Now, Rochak is the opposite of Kacharo. Huh? Rochak Shabdas is nice in its own sense. It's a positive word. But Kacharo nu Urdu che, and I hope that we will add one word to the Gujarati dictionary. Huh? Rochak is the opposite of Kacharo. So there are many things which we do. And Gujarat government just now has asked us to bring out a volume called Parampara. આપણે COP20 Paris માં થઈ એના માટે we had brought it out. Prime Minister wanted. No, the first COP where in 2015 when it was signed, the Indian government gave a book to all the other delegates called Parampara, which we were asked to prepare for them. And they talk about simple things. કે ભાઈ રોટલી વધી હોય તો શું કરવાનું? તો રોટલી વધી હોય તો ખાખરો બનાવી દેવાનો. Now ખાખરો is therefore a climate positive action. પછી ઓફકોર્સ ખાખરો એટલો બધો ભાવવા માંડ્યો કે ખાલી ખાખરો જ બનાવી પહેલેથી. But originally it was a way of preserving something without putting it into the fridge. Right. That was the thing. So there are so many such traditions in everything. કાશ્મીરમાં અમે ગયેલા પેલું after the earthquake, and we found that બધા ઘરની નીચે living room ની નીચે એ લોકો they keep the sheep and the goats under it. So we were asking our architects, young people had gone, why do you do that? કે જે એની ગરમી જતી ના રહે and it keeps the living room warm. Now this is an innovation in architecture, but which is part of their parampara. And we should also ask ourselves, what do we do? Even this carrying a cloth bag to go shopping was considered infra-dig for many people. Now, because it's got a label on it, eco something or something, label, now we carry it and we feel proud that we are part of a world ecological thing. So I think we need to have a little more confidence in ourselves. And Gujarati ma khas karine apni potani bhasha mate, we really don't. We say just about every other state feels more proud of their language than somehow we do. We discard it so fast, and we learn English also badly. It's not that Gujarati mate apna Angrezi ma etlu kharab shikhe. એટલે we use the whole sentence where the verbs are in Gujarati and the nouns are in English. I read car apne mana, that sort of thing. So I think there is a language is essential. It's also a way of looking at things. So in English, several names for things like dirt becomes dirty, soil becomes soiled, waste becomes wasteful. The words have a negative. In Indian languages, that is not negative. So when we look at earth, we don't think of mati is not considered. There's no negative word for mati. Mati has got its own value. Now that is the way you are. Without knowing it, you are looking at the world that way. And that is inherently. So that's about the language. But what you were saying was that when I thought I was going to do something quite different, and I was interested in development, not necessarily in the environment. But I realized that in our own garden, my son used to know planes in America. And in India, I was a plane, Dakota, one other. So, and cars, you are the ambassador. That is not a sustainable hobby. So he started asking me about birds, and I had no idea what these were. So someone told me that Salim Ali bhai se humne lucky chopdi hogi. I couldn't even believe that koi 10 volume pakshi upar lakha hai. So searched for it, got it. Initially we used to only know it by the page number. I bola hi nahi etla lamba naam ke bhai aap 41 page no pakshi ayu kya che. And slowly we found that bird watching was a very good introduction to nature. In fact, Lal Singh used to come to Shreyas every Sunday from Jamnagar, and I used to meet him at Shreyas to go over it. And his dedication had led to these books, which are really wonderful. I myself, during this lockdown, was sitting in front of our study, in front of this one tree, and the amount of action we saw in the tree was really fascinating. I've written a small booklet about it, but I think people connecting to nature is somewhat the best. And therefore camping was something very good where you need to connect. People have forgotten the connection. There was a joke that day in the New York Times, he said, I think you should spend more time in nature. Because they think of everything as a solution is an app, not that you actually mean that anyone should go out. But I think then we saw how much of the development gains are in fact being lost because of lack of environmental consideration. And that is happening all over. And I think there are things which we have to do in changing our lifestyles. And Gandhiji was first of all entirely about lifestyles. You know, his whole thinking and doing something himself first. He was not one of the preachy people. I mean, although he must have reached more people than those who try to preach, he did it by questioning his own action first. And I think that is something so powerful to learn. So I think in that sense, when I was asked, we'll maybe touch on your Gandhi thing and your environment thing, I said, these are not really two separate ideas. They're very much reinforcing each other. And Gandhi needs to be seen in a completely different light from what most of us see it. In fact, even the Gandhi film did quite a lot for young people, I found. And seeing Gandhi is a much stronger figure than what they learned from our textbooks, you know, which was something like that. And I think, but it is incredible that I think there is not a single month which goes by before a new book or two come out. Actually, the interest. The latest, of course, was Salman Khan going to the ashram yesterday.
Yes.
So there was a whole crowd. But I think everyone now sees that there is something there, something magical, not because there is a big exhibit, but just the fact that I'm sitting in the same place where Gandhi lived gives you something. And that's what when we ask visitors, it is just some of the feeling that this man lived. ટ્રમ્પને જે કીધું, ટ્રમ્પને અમે જે આપ્યું એક જ વાક્ય આપ્યું. ગાંધીજી એક ટેલિસ્મેન લખેલું કે whenever you think of any policy, think how does this affect the poorest person you've seen. And it was a very powerful one-liner which Gandhi gave all policymakers. So not that we might influence him, but we thought that if you have to give one sentence to him, let him ask that question. Okay, what does this policy which I'm saying, what does it do to that person? And I think that was, he is really quite something. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, while we're at Gandhiji and how he was and what all he contributed for the freedom of our country, Jaybhai, I wanted to ask you, કે અગર તમે અમને વ્યક્તિગત સ્વતંત્રતા એ ટર્મ જે છે એની પર થોડુંક અમારા જે યુથ અહીંયા આવ્યા છે એમને કહેશો, અને how did you come into what you are in as literature, columns, books, everything, એ વ્યક્તિગત સ્વતંત્રતા તમને કેવી રીતે મળી એની પર અમને થોડુંક હાઇલાઇટ કરી આપશો પ્લીઝ.
મારે તો ફાયદો એ હતો કે હિમાંશુભાઈને બધાને ખબર છે, જૂના મિત્રો જે છે એને મને મમ્મી પપ્પાએ ઘરે ભણાવ્યું. આઈ એમ એ પ્રોડક્ટ ઓફ હોમ સ્કૂલ. એટલે ઘરે જ ભણવાનું હતું. એટલે પેલી આ જેટલી સ્વતંત્રતાની તમે વાત કરો છો, દિવાલો જ નહોતી. ધેર વોઝ નો વોલ. કારણ કે આ સિલેબસ છે, આ એક્ઝામ છે, આ માર્ક્સ છે, એ સિસ્ટમ જ નહીં. આ નોલેજ છે, આ રીડિંગ છે, આ બુક છે, આ સિસ્ટમ હતી. આમાં તમને મજા આવે. એટલે મારી ટેક્સ્ટ બુક છે તો જુલે વર્ન પણ હોય, સાહસિકોની સૃષ્ટિ પણ હોય, અને એમાંથી વધતી મિયા ફુસકી કે અડુકિયો દડુકિયો કે બકોર પટેલ પણ હોય. એટલે ત્યાંથી શરૂ થતા અલગ અલગ ફિલોસોફી, અલગ અલગ વિચારધારાઓ. એટલે જ પેલું સ્ટીકર લેબલિંગ, જેને ઇન્ડિવિજ્યુઅલ ફ્રીડમની વાત કરે છે. આપણે સ્ટીરિયોટાઇપમાં બંને મિત્રો વાત કરતા હતા, કાર્તિકેયભાઈ અને અભયભાઈ, એનો સૂર જ છે કે તમે એક બોક્સમાં, એક સ્ટીરિયોટાઇપમાં ફિટ ન થઈ જાઓ. તમે તમારી જાતને ઇન્ટ્રોસ્પેક્ટ કરો, તમારી આસપાસના વાતાવરણને જુઓ, અને પછી તમે એ આત્મખોજ જે કરી હોય એમાંથી આગળ વધો. એટલે ખરું જેને શિક્ષણ કહેવાય એ જ છે ને કે તમે કોણ છો એ પહેલે તમારી જાતને પૂછો, એ જવાબ મેળવો, અને એક યાત્રા કરો. એ જર્ની એટલે આઉટવર્ડ જર્ની નહીં, એક ઇનવર્ડ જર્ની, આંતરિક યાત્રા કરો ભીતરની, કે જે યાત્રામાંથી તમને જડે એ જવાબ. તો કે હું આ છું, મારી પાસે આ છે, મને જવાબ મળ્યો કે દાખલા તરીકે હું કેમાં વધારે કરી શકું છું, તો કે લખવા બોલવા. તમને જવાબ મળ્યો હેરિટેજમાં, તમને જવાબ મળ્યો એન્વાયરમેન્ટ. આ કોલિંગ છે એક પ્રકારની. અંગ્રેજીમાં આના માટેનો શબ્દ છે કોલિંગ. એક પેલી બર્નિંગ ડિઝાયર કે ફાયર વિધિન જેને કહેવાય. હવે એ તમને ખબર પડે એના માટે સ્કૂલ છે, એના માટે શિક્ષણ છે. નહીં કે એ તમારું જે છે એની માથે પાણી રેડી દેવા માટે સિસ્ટમ. તો એ મને ફાયદો થયો, એ બિગિનિંગ. પછી એ ફાઉન્ડેશન એટલું સરસ હતું, પાયો એટલો મજબૂત હતો કે ઉપર ચણતર કામ થતું જ ગયું. કારણ કે મારા મમ્મી એક એવું વાક્ય કહેતા કે જઈને શીખતા શીખવવું છે. એટલે લર્નિંગ એટીટ્યુડ આપવી છે, શીખતા શીખવવું છે. પછી કંઈ પણ શીખશે, એને જે રસ પડે એ શીખશે. જરૂરી નથી કે એ બધું જે દુનિયા જેને શીખવાયેલું કે એ જ શીખે. એટલે હું ઘણી વખત યુવાન મિત્રો સાથે વાત થાય ત્યારે હું કહું કે સ્વતંત્રતા હોવી જ જોઈએ, પણ તમારી સ્વતંત્રતા છે એટલી જ સામેવાળાની છે. એટલે મારી સ્વતંત્રતા હું મારા પૂરતી રાખું, પણ એ બીજા ઉપર સુપર ઇમ્પોઝ ન કરવું, લાદી ન દઉં. આ મહત્વનું છે. આ જેટલા દુનિયામાં અત્યારે સંઘર્ષ છે ને, કોન્ફ્લિક્ટ છે ને, એ મારી વ્યાખ્યા મુજબ જ બાકીના એ જીવવું જોઈએ તેમાંથી શરૂ થયેલા છે. પછી એ ધાર્મિક હોય, એ રાજકીય હોય, એ અલગ અલગ શહેર કે ગામડા કે એવી બે સંસ્કૃતિના હોય. આ ગાંધીજીની જે મજા હતી ને, જ આ હતી. આપણા તમામ આઝાદીના લડવૈયાઓની મજા જ આ હતી. એ લોકો પોતે જે માનતા હતા ને એના માટે ફના થઈ ગયા. પણ એ જ બીજાએ માનવું જોઈએ ને, માને તો જ એ ભારતીય, એ માને તો જ એ માણસ, એ માને તો જ એ યુવાન. એવી વ્યાખ્યાઓ કોઈ નથી ભગતસિંહે કરી, નથી સુભાષબાબુએ કરી, નથી ચંદ્રશેખર આઝાદે કરી, નથી રામપ્રસાદ બિસ્મિલે કરી, નથી ઝાંસીની રાણી લક્ષ્મીબાઈએ કરી. તમે વિચાર કરો, આ બધામાં પોતે હું મારી વાત કરીશ, હું મારે શું જોઈએ છે વાત કરીશ. પણ એ ગાંધી, નહેરુ, સરદાર, તમે જેટલા નામ લો, એ કોઈએ આ વાત નથી કરી. અને જેણે આ વાત કરીને એને એ વખતે આપણા પૂર્વજોએ રિજેક્ટ કર્યા. જેણે એવી વાત કરી કે અમે માનીએ એમ જ તમારે જીવવાનું છે, તો એ તમે 1934 ને 1937 ની ચૂંટણીઓ જુઓ તો આપણા દાદા દાદીઓએ મત ના આપ્યા એ લોકો કે ભાઈ આ અમારે નથી જોતું, અમારે આ જોઈએ છે, આ મોડેલ જોઈએ છે. ઓલ ઇન્ક્લુઝિવ, સર્વ સમાવેશક. આ બંને મિત્રોની વાત જ એ છે ને કે તમારે આ મોડેલ બહારથી નથી લઈ આવવાનું. ઓલ ઇન્ક્લુઝિવ શબ્દ અંગ્રેજી છે, પણ એ ભાવના ભારતીય છે. ચારે બાજુથી બધું જ અમે સમાવી લઈએ. અમે તમે કહેતા હતા એમ કે ટોન જીન્સ પણ પહેરીએ અને કુર્તો પણ પહેરીએ, એમાં શું? બંને આપણા છે ને. આપણે પૃથ્વી ઉપર આવ્યા છીએ મુલાકાતી તરીકે, તો બંને મજાઓ કરીએ છીએ. આપણે પિઝા પણ ખાવો છે અને સુખડી પણ ખાવી છે. પણ પિઝા ઊંચો અને સુખડી નીચી, એ જે નવી વ્યાખ્યા આવી ગઈ છે. કારણ કે આ હું એની ભેગું બ્રાન્ડિંગ જોડાયેલું છે, ટેમ્પટેશન જોડાયેલું છે, પ્રેઝન્ટેશન, કન્ઝમ્પશન, પ્રાઇસ ટેગ બધું જ આવી ગયું છે. ત્યાં પેલી યુથ ફ્રીડમ, ઇન્ડિવિજ્યુઅલ ફ્રીડમ રહેતી નથી. તમને એમ લાગે છે કે હું ઇન્ડિવિજ્યુઅલ ફ્રીડમ છે, યંગ જનરેશનને એમ લાગે છે કે મારું ક્રેડિટ કાર્ડ આવી ગયું એટલે મારી પાસે ફ્રીડમ આવી ગઈ. પણ તમે અલગ અલગ એડવર્ટાઇઝમેન્ટના ગુલામ છો. તમારા ક્રેડિટ કાર્ડમાંથી તમને અલગ અલગ લોકો ઇન્ફ્લુઅન્સ કરે છે, જેમાં તમે પૈસા ખર્ચતા જ જાઓ છો. એટલે આપણે ક્રિએટર્સ સોસાયટી બનાવવાને બદલે કન્ઝ્યુમર સોસાયટી બનાવી દીધી. એટલે નવી પુસ્તકો, નવી ફિલ્મો, નવું કંઈ પણ નવું થાય એના કરતા જે છે વેચાય કેમ એમાં આપણને રસ વધારે પડે. એટલે વિકાસ આપણે એને કહીએ કે જ્યારે ખર્ચ કરવાને 10 જગ્યાઓ નવી ઊભી થાય. આપણે એમ કહીએ કે અમદાવાદનો વિકાસ થયો એટલે શું? તો કે 5 મોલ વધી ગયા, 6 મલ્ટીપ્લેક્સ વધી ગયા. પણ સારી 5 સ્કૂલ વધી, સારી 5 લાઇબ્રેરી વધી, સારી 5 બેસી શકાય દિનાતે શાંતિથી એવી ગાર્ડન જેવી, કોઈ બગીચા જેવી જગ્યાઓ વધી. એ વિકાસની વ્યાખ્યા નથી, અનફોર્ચ્યુનેટલી. એટલે આ મારી પર્સનલ જર્નીમાં આ બધું ઉભેરાતું ગયું. મેં નોકરી છોડી દીધી એટલે પેલા બંધનો નીકળતા ગયા. અને તમે બંધન નીકળે ને એટલે ગ્રેટ પાવર કમ્સ વિથ ગ્રેટ રિસ્પોન્સિબિલિટી. એ પેલું સ્પાઈડરમેન મૂવીમાંથી આવેલું કોટ છે, પણ છે સાચું કે તમે પેલું રિમોટ કંટ્રોલથી ચલાવવા જાઓ ને ત્યારે સમાજ આમ જુઓ તો એને સહેલું થઈ જાય છે કે આપણો લીડર છે, આપણો નેતા છે, આપણા ઉપરવાળા ટોપ ઓથોરિટી, સ્કૂલના પ્રિન્સિપાલ છે, મમ્મી પપ્પા છે, એ જ બધું કરે છે. નિર્ણય એ લેશે, જવાબદારી એ ભોગવશે. લગ્ન કરવા માટે છોકરો છોકરી એ જ ગોતી દેશે ને નવા મકાનના પડદાના કલર એ જ નક્કી કરી દેશે. હવે તમે જ્યારે એકચ્યુઅલી ઇન્ડિપેન્ડન્ટ થાવ છો, ખરેખર સ્વતંત્ર થાવ છો, ત્યારે એ સ્વતંત્ર એટલે સ્વ ઉપરનું તંત્ર, તમારું તંત્ર તમારે ગોઠવવાનું છે. એટલે એનો અર્થ એમ નહીં કે મન ફાવે એમ કરવું. ઇટ ઇઝ નોટ ઇન્ડિપેન્ડન્સ. મન ફાવે એમ કરવું. સ્વતંત્ર એટલે હવે તમારી જ જવાબદારી છે. યુ આર રિસ્પોન્સિબલ ફોર યોર ઓન એક્ટ. તમે પુખ્ત વયના થઈ ગયા છો, તમે નિર્ણય લ્યો, તમે ભોગવો. તમે આ દિશામાં ગાડી ટર્ન કરી, હવે ત્યાં ટ્રાફિક મળ્યો તો ફોન કરીને બીજાને બ્લેમ કરવાની જરૂર નથી. તમે નિર્ણય લીધો તો હવે તમે ઉભા રહ્યો બ્રેક કરી. આ વાત છે, આ રિયાલિટી છે. અને આઈ મસ્ટ એપોલોજાઇઝ. મારે તમારી ડિસ્કશન છોડીને વચ્ચેથી નીકળવું પડે એવું છે. 5:30 લગી હું છું એવું નથી કે નથી, પણ બંને મિત્રો એટલી સરસ વાત કરે છે કે આમાં મારું વિદ્યાર્થીની જેમ હું શીખું છું એ શીખવાનું અધૂરું રહી જાય. પણ ભારતીય કથા વિશ્વ નામનું એક પુસ્તક, એટલે પુસ્તક તો ના કહેવાય, આખો ગ્રંથ સંપુટ છે, કે શિરીષ પંચાલ નામના આપણા એક વડીલે વર્ષોની મહેનત પછી ભારતીય કથા વિશ્વ, એટલે વેદથી શરૂ કરી, પંચતંત્રથી શરૂ કરી, લોકવાર્તા સુધી આપણી પાસે કેવી કેવી વાર્તાઓ છે એનું બહાર પાડેલું. અને વિતસ્તાને ખ્યાલ છે કે એમનો પણ વાત હતી કે ભાઈ 30મી નવેમ્બરે આપણે કરી એ કાર્યક્રમ. શિરીષભાઈ પોતે આવે વડોદરાથી, અને એમાં આઈ એમ એ સોલો સ્પીકર. એટલે આમાં એવું છે કે આમાં તો 2 ખંતીધર અને મજબૂત માણસો છે કે જે તમને ઘણું બધું કહી શકે. પણ પેલામાં તો એવું છે કે 1 વિકેટ પડી જાય પછી દાવ ડિક્લેર થઈ જાય આખે આખો. એટલે શિસ્તના ભાગરૂપે, ગાંધીજીએ જ શીખવાડેલી શિસ્તના ભાગરૂપે કે સમયનું પાલન કરવું. એટલે અહીં પણ હું 4ના ટકોરે મેં કહ્યું તો 4ના ટકોરે હું આવી જઈશ, એમાં મોડું નહીં થાય, આવી ગયેલો. પણ આ એપોલોજી કરું છું, આમાં કોઈ વીઆઈપી ગીરી નથી. આપણે ત્યાં મોડો આવે અને વહેલો જાય ને એને VIP માની લેવામાં આવે છે. એટલે આ ચોખવટ કરું છું કે આ યુવાનોના ફ્રીડમ સાથે જોડાયેલી વાત છે કે તમે ફ્રી છો એનો અર્થ એવો નહીં કે તમે ફાઇટિંગ મોડમાં જ સતત છો. આપણે ત્યાં ફ્રીડમનો અર્થ એવો કરવામાં આવે છે કે હું જે છું એ જ બેસ્ટ અને હું જે કરું એ. આ આખી દુનિયા, તમે નેચરને જુઓ, કુદરતને જુઓ. હમણાં કાર્તિકેયભાઈ વાત કરતા હતા, કુદરત તમને એક જ વસ્તુ શીખવાડે છે કે આ દુનિયાના કેન્દ્રમાં તમે નથી. જો તમે સવારથી સાંજ સુધી, સૂર્યોદયથી સૂર્યાસ્ત સુધી 10-15 મિનિટ કુદરત સાથે બેસો શાંતિથી, મૌન રહીને, તો એક વસ્તુ શીખશો. બીજું કઈ શીખો કે ના શીખો, કે આ દુનિયાનું કેન્દ્રમાં હું નથી. હું નથી તોય સૂર્ય ઉગવાનો છે ને આથમવાનો છે. હું નથી તોય પક્ષી ટહુકવાના છે. હું નથી તોય વૃક્ષો છે એના પાંદડા લહેરાવાના છે. હું નથી તો એ કીડી એનું કામ કરવાની છે, અને હું નથી તો આ પવન પણ વહેવાનો છે. આપણે એવું માની લીધું છે કે દુનિયાના કેન્દ્રમાં હું છું, અને એ આપણી એબ્સોલ્યુટ ફ્રીડમની વ્યાખ્યા છે. મારી ફ્રીડમ એટલે શું? કે હું મારી બેગ લઈને સૌથી પહેલા પહોંચી જાઉં, હું લાઈન તોડીને સૌથી પહેલા આગળ નીકળી. આપણને એમ લાગે છે કે ધીસ ઇઝ માય યુથ ફ્રીડમ. નહીં, જેટલો પતંગ ઊંચે જાય એટલો જ, અમદાવાદને પતંગ શીખવાડવાનો ના હોય, બરાબર? પતંગ જેટલો ઊંચે જાય એટલો દોરો પણ ભેગો ખેંચાય છે. એ દોરાનું નામ જવાબદારી છે. એટલે જ્યારે તમે આઝાદીની વાત કરો ત્યારે પતંગની આઝાદી છે આકાશમાં ઊંચે ને ઊંચે ઉડવાની. એને કોઈ પેલી ટ્રાફિકના પોઈન્ટ નથી કે 3 ચોક લગી જઈને અટકી જવાનું છે. એ ઊંચે ને ઊંચે જઈ શકે, પણ ભેગો જવાબદારીનો દોરો હોય તો. દોરો જે મિનિટે જવાબદારીનો કપાશે, રિસ્પોન્સિબલ સિટીઝન થવાનો કપાશે, સેલ્ફ ડિસિપ્લિનનો, સ્વ શિસ્તનો કપાશે, એ મિનિટે પતંગ ગોથાલીઓ ખાઈને કોકના ઝંડામાં લૂંટાઈ જશે. અને આજ આપણે જાળવવાનું છે આઝાદી.
Thank you very much, sir. I always feel like I keep listening to you, and you don't stop. but unfortunately, we have to move. So, sir, this is for Abhay Bhai. This is for you. So, I was. You talked very beautiful about the conservation. It's not about conservation, it's about revitalization. You also talk about the definition of a heritage. So what we create today is going to be heritage for our future generations after 50 years, right? So this question is or a revitalization, or we can call it a modernization. So is this modernization to these heritage sites is vital to preserve and promote for our future generations, or how do you actually think about the modernizing them so we can connect this to our future generations?
First of all, I don't think that any site is should be use specific, because our uses keep changing. I'm not talking about places of worship necessarily, because there is some special sentiment attached to them, but any other building site is use specific. So if you want to revitalize this, it means that you have to reuse it. And therefore, depending on whatever use you feel, like I felt that it would make sense to make a hotel over here, because that was a use of a building in a certain way. I think any site, if you find the appropriate use for it and do it in a manner which is sensitive, I can only use that word because there is no rule. I think when you're doing up a site, you have to be sensitive, and that sensitivity comes from your education, because that is a lens. What is sensitivity can be debatable. But so essentially, whatever we have done is through whatever I understood as honest. That was something that I was, and that continues to grow in a sensitive manner without necessarily putting over a burden on any kind of resource, which included financial resource.
Thank you. I think I think this is so important, and about this sensitivity and connect, very precise. So thank you for the next question I have for you, sir, Kartikeya sir. So I might go a little negative side of it. So we are just speaking about sustainability, the couple of sustainability in India, something you also believe, we all believe. But India today is unfortunately identified as one of the most highly polluted globally. Like where did we go wrong? Right? We talk about sustainability the most.
Well, there are two levels. One is, of course, we don't take responsibility for what a factory does. And for instance, there were many chemicals which were banned in Europe because they were so highly polluting, dye chemicals and others, to their environment. So what they said was that let India make it, especially Gujarat, and you export it. So the pollution came here, the product still went there, but the pollution they say the ship breaking. So there are several examples where we have accepted a project which is highly polluting and nobody is paying for that price. They are not paying. Today, now there is a law on extended producer's responsibility, EPR. So even if I make something, if I'm Coca-Cola and I make a can, it is my responsibility to see that 70-80% of the cans are collected and are recycled. It is no longer, I cannot say, now what can I do if people throw it anywhere? So first of all, I think certain concepts are changing. The second thing is that we think of regulation as some of the main way to do it. So we say that, okay, let Gujarat Pollution Control Board go and regulate this. Let so-and-so regulate it. Now that doesn't really work as well in a country which is poor, where by throwing that industrial pollution, let's say, I am going to save crores of rupees, and that man needs maybe $1 lakh rupees to not look at what I'm doing. So that doesn't work. What works best is where you also have what he was saying about Swatantra, what if people control themselves to some extent, which comes out of education ultimately. So you need people. Now, it is not necessarily everyone. We can give industrial associations responsibility at a certain level that you find that nobody in your estate, we've done it with Mr. Patwari, nobody in your estate will pollute, and you know what it is. We had once a meeting with the Rickshaw Drivers Association here, and they said कि हमने जवाबदारी आपको नहीं कि we will see कि हमारा मत कोई नहीं करे वो. But you always have the police do it. Then it becomes a very different thing. So I think people and their associations can do a large amount of conservation, protection themselves if you let them take pride in it, not because it is an externality. So I think this is one area which we really need to do it. Secondly, we have a whole lot of traditions. I mean, we don't throw away in the same way. Today, you will rarely find, for instance, a glass bottle in the waste, because we will wash it and we'll put some new pickle in it or something, we'll put it and keep it. Or we will sell it to a kabaddi wala who will again keep it there. So India has a certain tradition. If you go abroad, you will find first-rate sofas just put on the sidewalk because they don't know how to do it. So we also meet with some new thing. For instance, OLX. They came and said that, look, we are doing this thing where you can give something and someone else can pick it up. So we are introducing the new old Indian tradition, but doing it through a modern method. So there are many things which are very much part of our tradition, which we should really do. And that is, again, where innovativeness is required. This 75 years is a point of reflection, but it is really, Prime Minister mentioned it very clearly, it's the way of looking at where do we want to be when we are 100. And I've been around that 75 years, except for first 100 days. I've been celebrating it myself to say that what a huge transformation this one is. But there are all sorts of small transformations which we do in everyday life, and we need to be more reflective. And ultimately, it is the education system which makes it. He is self-learned, so he did not have all those things hammered into him that you can only look at it this way. Shreyas or CN, or there are many schools which try and give this also to their children. Do we give it to our own children? That's another thing. Do we let the child wants to play one thing, but the parent has a hidden ambition, let my son, we impose. So I think letting ourselves be what it is really what our value was. Our whole education system was based on a seeker. It was not the other way around. I learn and I find out that now I learn everything from Abhay I've learned. Now I go somewhere else, and it was that type of, it was driven by the learner. Now, what is fantastic is now the net is also opened up possibilities. I was been telling some youth people that on Wikipedia Gujarati, for instance, there are not enough entries. If like you due to the ratio, if every youth decides, okay, in every week, one Gujarati entry for Wikipedia I will put in. So it becomes really a rich resource in our language. It's a very easily practical thing. Suppose GCCI says that we are going to put, say, 50,000 entries over this year in Gujarati Wikipedia, making it a much better source of attack. Then it will work. So I think we need to look at some practical projects. There are many, many projects which we can discuss at some stage. But GCCI is the right forum to really take this forward. And Gujarat is got the potential. When people want to do it, we can do it. I mean, we've taken up huge challenges. And I think that is the leadership which GCCI can and should provide. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I have to leave, but you can continue. Yeah.
We are almost done.
Because I
Just-
have to be there at 5:45, so I have to rush. That's why.
That's fine.
But you can continue. It's a really wonderful. I must say it's a really wonderful discussion because of me. Don't close the discussion. You just carry forward the good thoughts from Abhay Bhai and Kartikeya Bhai. Only thing I want to say, what to do. Vitasta was supposed to ask me that what to do for the new generation for the next 25 years. Be original. Respect others. Be original. Respect others. Think independently, but act responsibly. Thank you.